Hello everyone and welcome to Animal Training with me, Amazon John, Silly Safari Shows. We are Indiana's premier live animal edutainment company. And yes, I'm so excited to be talking to you about animal training, behavioral modification, operant conditioning. Okay, I'm throwing out a lot of big words. Well, I read on a second grade level, but I read. Look, operant conditioning is a term that psychologist B.F. Skinner coined, and here's what it means. It's a learning principle in which environmental conditions, contingencies, they're controlled and manipulated in such a way as to change an animal's behavior. Okay, I know, I'm throwing out a lot of terminology here, but let me introduce you to somebody who I think can help you explain this. Look, it's Pavlov. Okay, it's not Pavlov, it's Pavlov's dog. Yeah, that's right. I'm in Indianapolis, Indiana. I can see Russia from my backyard. I rang a bell, and this little guy came running. The problem was, he was drooling something awful. I guess he had been conditioned to drool to the sound of a bell. Well, at least that's what Pavlov, a Russian behaviorist, had taught his dog to do. Now, let me go over some terminology here, because now we're getting into vocabulary. He had given his dog a stimulus. A stimulus is any feature of the environment that affects behavior. In Pavlov's experiment, the stimulus was food. What was the response? Well, when the dog saw food, it salivated. I really want that piece of red meat. Here's the difference between an unconditioned and a conditioned stimulants, and this is where we're really going to start to get into the finer points of animal training. A feature of the environment that causes a natural reflex action is what we call an unconditioned stimulus. If I blow a puff of air in your face, you're going to blink. That's unconditioned. It's just going to happen. But if I take a feature of the environment that has an effect through its association with an unconditioned stimulant. For example, in Pavlov's experiment, he conditioned the unconditioned experiment of food causing salivation with the sound of a bell. He created a conditioned stimulus. Now, when he rang that bell, he actually created a conditioned response. The bell would make the dog salivate. And what does that mean? Well, now we're talking about animal training. And here's what's going on in the animal's mind. What can happen next? In the beginning, Pavlov's dog would salivate to the sound of any bell, a doorbell, a church bell, you name it. He was generalizing the sound of bell with the thought of steak and food. But Pavlov took it one step further. He's learned to discriminate the conditioned stimulants. There was a food bell, and then there were non-food bells. So the dog learned, oh, I'm going to drool at this sound, but not that one. And then, like Pavlov could only do, he took that stimulus and caused extinction. He would ring the bell, not present any food, and the dog just got bored or started to disassociate the conditioned stimulus with that salivation, and the behavior went extinct. By behavior, of course, I'm talking about the salivation, and it just became extinct. The dying out of a conditioned response by breaking that association causes the behavior to go away. Now, why do animals even behave? Well, if you think about it, there are two types of behaviors. There are natural behaviors. My dog knows how to sit, how to run, how to lay down. You don't teach dogs that. It kind of comes factory installed, even salivation. I used to have this dog Bear that would snarl at me for a whole bunch of reasons. It was a natural behavior. An innovative behavior is where we teach dogs to fetch, to walk on their hind legs, to dance. A dog can even teach itself, for example, to climb on a counter for a piece of food, or open a door for whatever reason. Why do dogs or any animal do these types of behaviors? The answer to that is motivation. And that's what we're going to dive into next. Okay, motivation explains why animals kind of are inclined to behave the way they do. Reinforcement explains how that motivation is applied to the stimuli that animals are exposed to and the responses that they give us. Okay, so let's look at what stimulus means. There are neutral stimuli out there. A bell doesn't make a dog salivate. It's a neutral stimulus. However, with animal training, you can pair a neutral stimulus like a bear to an unconditioned stimulus, showing the food made Pavlov's dog salivate, and you have created, in effect, a conditioned stimulus. Go back to my dog Bear we talked about a minute ago. He's a very headstrong dog. He passed in 2011. I miss him. He wrote his own comedy. I could do a lot of things with that dog, and he naturally just wanted to smile. He was a very headstrong, dominant, we call that an alpha male dog. I didn't teach him how to snarl. I simply paired that snarl to both the visual and a tactile stimulus, a cue, we call it in animal training. I would point to him and I would say, no teeth. And what I did was create a conditioned stimulus. See, next, that kind of leads us to what we mean by motivation and reinforcement. Reinforcement is any event that occurs first during or upon completion of a behavior. And second, it increases the likelihood of that behavior happening again in the future. They are connected in real time, so the animal knows this is my reinforcement, the stimulus and the response I get. It's all right there connected. A lot of people think that they can bribe an animal, and this isn't reinforcement. Bribery by definition is an attempt to reinforce a behavior that hasn't happened yet, so the animal hasn't connected it to any response that occurs in real time. So bribery is something we're not going to talk about. It's kind of off the table. It doesn't work with animals. But reinforcement is where you condition that response. Go back to my dog. There's a picture of him right there over my shoulder. All I had to do is use a deeper growly voice, and I would say, sit. He would snarl, and the crowd would laugh. As I acted in astonishment to this in our theatrical presentations, I would turn to him and I would say, no teeth, and he would snarl. The stimulus was me using a different voice, using a different body energy. I would point, no teeth, and he would snarl, and that was the response. Now, his reward, we'll get to that in a minute, but he loved to have his ears rubbed. So all I had to do was pay him by giving him that tactile sense of, good boy, you did a good job. And it all is a chain of series that happen in real time that really, for me, in fact, with this dog, allowed me to modify his behavior. His motivation was to be headstrong and dominant. I took that behavior and I innovated it, and I turned it into something that was reinforced. So next, we'll take a look at the difference between positive and negative reinforcers, because even you and I in our own life respond very predictively, very regularly, meaning the behavior gets repeated in the future by both positive and negative reinforcers. One's not necessarily better than the other in terms of making sure that that behavior happens again in the future. I'll explain. Okay, so motivation is kind of our way of describing how an animal thinks. Reinforcement really defines how those patterns of behavior get laid down. Remember, reinforcement is an event that occurs during or upon the completion of any behavior, and it increases the likelihood of that behavior happening again. And let's be clear, reinforcement can be positive or negative. A positive reinforcement is something that the animal wants. Could be food, could be petting, could be their favorite toy. Police dogs totally work for that tennis ball, that toy. Give me my toy, I want my toy. They do amazing things for society and for their partners on the force. A negative reinforcement is something that the animal wants to avoid, but it still makes sure that that behavior is going to happen again in the future. It increases the predictability, removing something unpleasant when the desired behavior occurs. Anybody that's ever sat in a car and not buckled their seatbelt has been, you've known negative reinforcement. Ding, ding, ding. Oh, I better put my seatbelt on. And the sound goes away. You've just been negatively reinforced because of that behavior. A lot of people confuse reinforcement with punishment, and punishment, it doesn't work. And here's why. Punishment is what happens when a behavior results in the removal of something that the animal wants, and it's not tied to real time. It's not tied to predictability. There's no predictable outcome for the behavior's reoccurrence in the future, which is why punishment isn't something that we're going to talk about as far as modifying animal behavior. We will be talking about hoof stock specifically, and how we can use both positive and negative reinforcement in low stress situations to manipulate hoof stock, specifically reindeer, because I love reindeer. Hey, since we're talking about motivation, now would be a good time for me to introduce you to Abraham Maslow. Back in the 1940s, he was one of those scientists that really wondered what motivated people, and he came up with this pyramid behind me here. We call it Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He wanted to know what motivated people, and he theorized that for a person to work towards self-actualization, their basic needs had to be met. In other words, he said, and I quote, "It is quite true that man lives by bread alone when there's no bread. But when there's plenty of bread and his belly is full, how does he live? What motivates him?" If we apply that to animals, you kind of understand what he's leaning towards. An animal has to have its basic physiological needs met, and then of course there's safety, and in the course of reindeer there's a social need because they're herd animals, they want to be in the group. And then how does one reindeer on its own have self-esteem and reach a self-actualization, to be a bonded, a happy, you could call it, I suppose, a well-adjusted member, a self-actualized individual? That's what we'll talk about next as we start to apply this notion of training reindeer. Okay, so now I have to ask you a question. Have you ever kissed a reindeer? Me, I do it every day, because for us with our herd at Silly Safaris, we use that as a way of communicating with the individual as well as the herd. And for your purposes, now we probably really need to get into the meat of the discussion of what is low stress training. You know, low stress training with hoof stock, the management of them, the movement of them, the herding, the manipulating of them. And for this part of the discussion, I really need to introduce you to a term called a conditioned reinforcer. Okay, we've already talked about reinforcement. That's something that is going to make a behavior occur more often in the future. The predictability is reinforced. But if you've ever heard of clicker training, blowing a whistle, these are bridges that become basically a conditioned reinforcer. It's taken it one step out. Here's what I mean. If you've ever seen a dolphin show, you know that when the dolphin jumps as high as it can jump, you can't be there at that moment in midair to give the dolphin the fish, the reinforcement of food. So you use a bridge, we call it. It's when you say, "Good dog, that's a bridge. Here's the treat." For the dolphin trainer, beep, they blow the whistle, bridge. When the dolphin lands back in the water, it can swim over and get the reinforcement of the food. These are conditioned reinforcements, and here's how you make one. If some initial meaningless signal, like a whistle or a clicker, is deliberately presented before or during the delivery of the reinforcement, the food, you have created a conditioned reinforcement. For us and our herd, that's what we mean by kissing a reindeer. When we kiss a reindeer, we always do that right before we turn them loose after any procedure on our farm, trimming hooves, or when we squeeze them into constraint that we use for giving them vaccines or drawing blood or whatever it is. Before we turn them loose, we kind of wait for them to present us slack in the lead. Again, that low stress kind of mentality of, okay, you're the boss, I'm cool with this. We give them a kiss and then we turn them loose. The reinforcement in this case is the freedom. The bridge is, I have to kiss you first. And that has become for us a very unique strategy in terms of manipulating the herd. More important, as you see in this picture of the little boy kissing the reindeer behind me, when we're in front of audiences, when we're in front of the people that are coming to meet the reindeer at our shows, they're going to kiss a reindeer too. So the reindeer have become used to it. It's once they have relaxed and given us the slack that we need, the kiss signals that the reward of freedom is coming, and that's just kind of part of that tandem of us being the leadership, the dominant, the alpha member of the herd, and for them to follow suit with us in terms of what we do. How can we apply that to other low stress reindeer management techniques? Well, we'll have to talk about that next, won't we? Hey, you're probably wondering, stress, boy, that sounds like a bad word. But kind of like we talked earlier about reinforcements being positive or negative, stress can be positive or negative too. Sit down, everybody in class, pop quiz, negative stress. Stress can be negative. Families going through a divorce, a car accident. These are things that are stressful and in a negative impact. But stress can also be positive. Hey, you've just got a promotion. Here comes more responsibility and hopefully a higher paycheck too. These are different stressors. You're moving, so you get a bigger house. You're going to a better place. Positive stress. Reinforcers can be positive or negative. Stress can be positive or negative too. But I think if you want to understand stress and how it applies to low stress training, I probably need to introduce you to the concept of what is an aversive stimulus. I don't know if I can do that any justice on my own. I'm not smarter than a fifth grader, remember? So I have a friend with me today, and his name is Houdini. Houdini is a Eurasian eagle owl. And yes, if you notice, he's got some fluffy downy feathers on him because he's just a baby. He's only 3, almost 4 months old. Eurasian because they live in Europe and Asia, kind of near the Mongolian reindeer area too, but also because he's big. Eagle owl because he's big. You think he's big now? Ooh, wait until Houdini flaps his wings. Did you see that? This bird has great big wings. Wow! What? He's got ginormous wings. Oh, did you notice he didn't do it that time? Because I did not give him the aversive stimulus. Here's my point. Every time we say wings in one of our Silly Safari shows, we don't just want for people to see the owl for who he is. We want for them to see the whole owl, including his wingspan. So we give him an aversive stimulus. If I roll my glove just a little bit, it stimulates a windy condition on a narrow tree branch. At this age, this guy's a brancher. He's too big to be sitting in the nest with his siblings. So he sits on the branch where he can exercise and flap his wings. I roll the glove, he gets thrown off balance. If I keep rolling the glove, he stays off balance. When he complies with the behavior, I stop moving the glove, and that's the reward. Now he is much more stable. That is going back to what we've talked about before. Every time we say wings, we rotate our glove just a little bit, and it gives him the need actually to maintain his balance. He has to stop flapping his wings, I stop moving the glove, and now he's stable. Of course, in this sense, we're also training our audience to better understand what it is we're trying to do in the context of the education. We're training them, we're waiting, the audience wants us to say the word, wings. We'll even spell it so that they can see what it is that we're up to. Now that you understand that sense of how stress can be used for training, we now know what is an aversive stimulus. How does this apply to low stress training with reindeer? Well, for that, we're going to have to talk about what is a conditioned aversive signal, and that's going to require another moment. Haha, now you know what an aversive stimulus is. So we're really ready to start to kind of scratch that surface of what is low stress training with hoofstock, and specifically reindeer. You know, hoofstock basically spend their whole lives knowing 2 things: zebra, gazelle, reindeer. First, they have no way to protect themselves against apex predators, lion, tiger, polar bear. And second, hoofstock are delicious. They're made of meat, and that's what these predators want. So when we talk about hoofstock, we talk about something that we call flight distance. A zebra doesn't care how far away the lion is. The zebra just wants to know, is that a lion? Do I have to run? And they use that time and space to protect themselves. So how does this apply to reindeer? Well, I have a pad out here. We call it the bachelor pad. I've got 5 males in one of my reindeer yards out here. 4 of them are steers, and they were bottle raised, and they're so sweet. One of them is our bull, and he was raised by his mom, because you never bottle raise the bull you want to use. And his mom suffered from BSC. That stands for bat stupid crazy. And of course, I don't think that BSC is something that's congenital. It's environmental. The baby learned that flight distance, that sense of, well, if mom's worried and she's running away from Amazon John, maybe I should be afraid of him too. So growing up with a mom who has a really big flight distance is going to teach the baby a really big flight distance. I don't want this bull to have a big flight distance. I've been working with him, and I've been trying to use low stress techniques to try to get him much more used to me, to see me as not so much a threat, but just another member of the herd, and somebody who kind of has leadership abilities too, which is why we really need to talk about a conditioned aversive signal. And that's a big word, but it'll become crystal clear if you ever think of being in the park and you've seen somebody walking their dog, and they're popping that, what do we call it, the choke chain. They're trying to get the dog to lead, but no, stay, come. They're giving all these corrections without any warning that the correction is about to happen. If you were to see a toddler getting ready to run into the street, you would scream, no! That is what we mean by a conditioned aversive signal. With my dogs, I don't even use a lead. I just go, or get close. No, these are words that we use. They're not necessarily negative words. It's okay to say no to a toddler that's about to touch a hot stove. But they are a conditioned aversive signal, which indicates if you proceed, something really negative, in this case maybe even a punishment, is about to happen. Certainly a reinforcer. I suppose a toddler could touch the stove next time too, but usually if they touch the stove, they're never going to touch a hot stove again. I remember my mom telling me, don't touch that stove. I touched it anyway, and man, it hurt. But I probably didn't understand at that time, at that age, a conditioned aversive signal. Now when I go in with this bull that I'm trying to work with, I go in with open hands, and I herd him, kind of like a border collie herding sheep. The border collie is seen by the sheep as a predator, but the border collie is not going in, driving, trying to hurt the sheep. He's just moving the sheep. He's on the outskirts. He's being an aversive signal. When the sheep comply, the border collie is relaxed. He's told to stay. He's manipulated through his own series of behavioral modification techniques, and the aversion is taken away. So both the sheep and the border collie are this nice synergistic animal behavior. It's fascinating, but it's a working way of managing the herd. Well, when I go in with my bull, I usually have to corner him, and I've got my hands up, and my aversive signal is, it's okay, whoa, you're fine, hold on. When I get him to the corner, finally, he's either going to do one of two things. Going to try to go through the fence or through the corner, in which case I give him a bigger flight distance, and I wait for him to give me the attention that I'm looking for. And when he does give me that attention, I'm paused, my hands are open, I'm out. I usually point to their halter and I say, just want your halter, and I can go in much more slower. So in one sense I'm a predator, in the next sense I'm just another member of the herd sharing the same space. It's subtle and it's tricky, but it is low stress, and hopefully over time he'll learn how to better manage that. There are a lot of other resources that I want for you guys to look for. Of course, I wouldn't be worth my salt if I didn't share this stuff with you. One of my favorite books is Karen Pryor, Don't Shoot the Dog. That's a book that I relied on heavily for the information that I've shared with you today. But I also want you to look at natural horsemanship. If you were to Google natural horsemanship, Pat Pirelli, he uses a lot of these low stress techniques in training horses. There's other llama trainers that I know of that walk towards a llama. Can I stand this close to you without you running away? Click, and they're using that condition reinforcer. Remember, we talked about that. It's called a bridge. Good. I can stand 50 feet from you without you running away. Click, and then of course there's some reward that's presented. Could be a food item, could be touch, could just be you leaving, removing that negative reinforcement. Can I stand 40 feet from you? Click. Can I stand 30? And little by little, you're teaching the llama, maybe in this case the reindeer or whatever else you're working with, to allow you to get closer. I've been able to work with this bull, and certainly I hope for better outcomes in the future, but low stress training techniques definitely help us to manage hoofstock, because they want to live in a world where they know that they're safe and protected and free. And it just kind of goes back to what we said in the beginning, which is I love reindeer, and thank you so much for all of your attention.